We've all, or many of us, or you, have learned about this event in your history classes. And this was a significant event in recent history. And today I'm going to talk about some of the circumstances that led up to the March on Washington in 1963. I'm going to give a few personal reflections about that, and then talk about some of the consequences and why it's still such an important event even today. And this is dedicated to the memory of my mom, and you'll see why. In today's environment, it's hard to imagine what things may have been like then. In fact, some of you who were a little younger than some of us may find it just inconceivable that life in the United States was ever something like this. Now here's a distinguished politician, four-time governor of Alabama, one-time presidential contender, and this is one of his famous quotes: "Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." Now imagine a politician running for president on a platform like that. Inconceivable. To say it out loud. Now what does segregation mean? Imagine a sign like this. This was quite commonplace in the South. Imagine being a person of color and experiencing the official trappings of society through a lens like this. Encountering things white only. Can you imagine a sign like this existing today? Or a sign like that? And yet, this is something that existed for 100 years after the so-called emancipation. Imagine being able to advertise a job like this. And this is one of the important things, and keep this image in mind, because we often think of civil rights, but civil rights don't mean anything without economic rights. Civil rights are an interesting abstraction if you're hungry, if you don't know where next rent's coming from. So the March on Washington in 1963 was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. And notice they put jobs first, because economic equality is far more important than social equality. But the two go hand in hand, and that's why they were together. Now, starting at the turn of the 20th century and increasing in frequency into the 1950s and early 1960s, there was a movement to bring about change, to change these so-called Jim Crow laws. And take a look at this picture and imagine yourself one of these children, and think of the times in school when you were told about the kindly police officer, and the police officer is your friend. And imagine what they're experiencing. And this is just one incident. Those who try to non-violently change the status quo encountered scenes so violent that I could not bring myself to bring some of the images that happened here. This is one of the tamer images that happened when people tried to peacefully assert the rights that they had supposedly had going back to the Declaration of Independence. Now, in the civil rights movement, there was a growing groundswell to go about changing this. And there was a growing frustration with administrations that paid lip service. And I'm specifically talking about President John F. Kennedy, who gave great lip service to civil rights, and when it came down to actually doing things, was almost not there. And so in the 1940s, two gentlemen, Bayard Rustin, who you've heard me talk about, and his mentor, A. Philip Randolph, planned a march on Washington in 1941 for this very thing. And that led directly to President Franklin Roosevelt's executive order that desegregated all federal industries in support of defense. And so the event was canceled because they achieved at least a modest objective. But then in the early 1960s, these two gentlemen were called upon to create a march on Washington. And you know, we've often seen the images, but behind the scenes, Bayard Rustin was really the driving force of this. So here he is with Cleveland Robinson, who was in charge of a lot of administrative things in their organizational headquarters, which was in Harlem. And here's Bayard Rustin in front of that headquarters. Again, this was located in Harlem, and this was organized for quite some time beforehand. This is the official